What does that feedback loop look like, and how do you integrate that into your marketing plan?
It does require actively asking, tell me again, because sometimes sellers are anxious to be heard, but a lot of times they don't want to bother marketing or oh, marketing's not going to change for me. My number one goal in being in this role is to make sales love us. It means that I'm going to set our sellers up to be successful as much as I can. I call it a simple bill of materials. What's that simple bill of materials that they need? The customer journey is so much longer than it used to be. The way I like to think of it is, what are the big questions that a prospect is having at every stage of that journey? Where does sales come in? Where does marketing? When is the handoff? When should we keep marketing while sales is still selling?
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
This episode is brought to you by Demandbase. Demandbase helps B2B companies hit their revenue goals using fewer resources by using the power of AI to identify and engage the accounts and buying groups most likely to purchase. Their account-based technology unites sales and marketing teams around insights that you can understand and facilitates quick actions across systems and channels to deliver big wins. It's flexible, scalable ABM built for you.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. It's a good day to be a day, and we've got a fantastic guest lined up. Been excited for this conversation for a while. I am joined by Kelly Hopping. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pumped to have you. And there's so much I want to talk through with you, so we're just going to dive right in. And I do like to start with a quick bio just for listeners. So you've got a very impressive one. I was always doing research before this, but Kelly is currently the CMO for Demandbase. Many of our listeners will know and be quite familiar with Demandbase. They've been an awesome partner to GTM now and everything we're doing, and I've been a fan for a large portion of my career. And Kelly is responsible for differentiating the go-to-market platform, increasing brand presence, and accelerating acquisition and conversion of potential customers. Prior to joining Demandbase, Kelly honed her startup skills as the first CMO at Haiku, a Series B venture-backed data protection SaaS company. Still rocking on a really incredible trajectory. And you still continue there as an advisor. And then before that, you actually served as a CMO for the digital markets division of Gartner. Again, many will be very familiar with Gartner, and you managed a portfolio of brands to, again, grow brand awareness, demand gen in that market. And something I found super interesting was you and your marketing team actually drove 100% of the revenue acquisition for the $300 million organization, which is crazy, 100%. How did that happen? Usually there's, sales plays a role, and was it all inbound, or talk me through how that happened?
Yeah, so it was a cool business. I never worked in one of those kind of two-sided marketplaces like that. But essentially what Gartner Digital Market is, the brands you've heard of are Capterra, Software Advice, GetUp. Perhaps they were kind of all acquired. They were similar businesses, slightly different, users on the back end, but they were all bought by Gartner to have kind of an SMB component to something that, essentially Gartner does in a large scale through research and advisory. This is a way for customers, mostly SMB and small companies, to do research on software and products and things that they wanted to use. So the two-sided marketplace is that there is a sales team, but the sales team isn't selling Gartner Digital Markets. What they're doing is they're getting software vendors to create a page on our site. And so they would just create those. They're outreaching to companies and saying, hey, if you put it here, some of our people may come through your page. So basically trying to get listings. And then what marketing did was we drove all the traffic to the page. And then we ran the CRO of the pages to get the content. So if someone came in and they wanted to read a review of Demandbase, for example, they'd come in, they'd read the review. If they wanted to learn more and they clicked on it, we got paid. And then the lead would go to Demandbase. And so we, Gartner, would get paid on that. And so basically my team drove all the traffic to the site. And then the conversion of the people on the pages. And so that's where the revenue came from. So for example, if we were I would call my paid search gal on the 29th of the month and I'd be like, hey, we're coming up $1 million short. She'd be like, I'll take care of it. And the next day we'd have $1 million in revenue that came in because she turned up paid search, could drive more people to the site, and then we got paid for it. So it was a pretty incredible thing to have all of those levers. Organic was 50% of our revenue. Driven by we had a 30-person content team that did nothing but write SEO friendly content. A lot of listicle stuff, that would drive people to a page. And then we'd use paid to bring them in. We used partners to bring it in. We used a number of different vehicles to get people to come to the page. And then they poked around, they clicked right, and we got paid. So it was pretty amazing.
That is very cool. And 50% organic. That's wild. And primarily content. Would you partner with a lot of other brands, or how did you think about content? Because that's a lot of traffic. I know Gartner gets a ton, and 50% is coming from organic.
Yeah, that was for Gartner Digital Markets. Big Gartner probably feels different. I'm not sure exactly what theirs are, because my SEO leader actually that reported to me went over to then help Gartner with SEO because he was such a genius at it. Very, very good at that. But basically, we wrote content we had the gift of writers, because when you think about as being part of Gartner, they're all researchers. There's 1 million writers inside the Gartner family. And so we pulled 30 of those out to just do writing for GTM. And a lot of it was listicle stuff, 5 things to consider when you're buying ABM software, top 5 vendors in the accounting software space, best things to know when you are purchasing finance software, whatever it happened to be. And so that we just wrote that kind of listicle content all day long. And then we obviously had a big tech SEO component as well, getting the site optimized for traffic and all that kind of stuff. That's when I lose. That's when, my expertise runs out a little bit, but the teams were excellent at it. My SEO team was 19 people, because that was such a huge driver of revenue.
That's awesome. We had a leader from HubSpot on the pod recently, and yeah, they're obviously a huge content and SEO shop as well. And they're talking about, is that still applicable today? And we're talking a little bit about this idea of AI SEO that might be coming down the line, if not already here, which is going to be an interesting thing for marketers to explore in the future. But pulling us back, want to finish up your bio. So prior to Gartner, you led marketing at Rackspace and AMD, and spent some time actually in kind of B2C and food marketing at Kraft, which is super interesting. And also have an MBA from Harvard Business School. Congrats. That is insane. I imagine that was a lot of work. And a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering, which you don't hear too many marketers having, from Texas A&M. You also serve on the board of Empowering Women as Leaders in Austin, speak at various leadership conferences. I think you were on one digitally just earlier today. And if that's not all enough to keep you busy, you also authored a book called Rising, How to Thrive as a Corporate Exec While Staying True to Yourself, which launched in 2023. And you're a mom and a wife on all top of that in Austin, Texas. Truly a superwoman and such an incredible career. How did you find time to A, get your MBA, and B, write a book somewhere along that way?
Well, fortunately, I did not do all of those things at one time, so that helps. I always joke that I'm a great mom, and I'm a great leader, and I'm a great friend, and I'm a great daughter, but probably not all at the same time. I'm probably one of those at any given time. All 4 is a heavy lift. But I got my MBA, years ago. I went when I was, I did it between jobs. Some people kind of try to do it part-time on the side. That's tough. I sort of made the decision that if I got into a school good enough to make it worth the opportunity cost of not working for 2 years, then I would go. But if it was a school that was like, meh, then it may not be worth taking the time off. So when I got accepted to Harvard, I was like, this seems good enough. I'll go ahead and leave the workforce. And so I did. So I left and moved up to Boston. And then for 2 years, I did nothing but that MBA. I mean, I did a summer internship, but I just focused on that. I fully immersed myself in it. I traveled around the world with those folks. I did, research field projects with the New England Patriots. I traveled all over Europe and all over Southeast Asia. And I mean, I just had a ball, South America, with my team, my classmates and things. It was the greatest experience. So that one was very easy because it was an intentional thing. And I didn't have any like money or kids or debt. Like it was, I wasn't giving up anything. It was pre-husband, pre-kids. And then afterwards, worked, I had a few kids and then decided to write a book. I guess I kind of always had it in my mind. I was never like an aspiring author. Like I'm not creative enough to like write like great books. I'm reading this book right now and it's like some fantasy adventure or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know how people like dream up these crazy places. I didn't have any of that in me, but I had a horrible, horrible work environment. Right after Gartner, I went to this private company and it was such a toxic, terrible work environment. It was my first taste of working for a founder. By the way, my next book will be called I'll Never, Ever, Ever Work for a Founder Again. But I worked for a founder and it was so horrible that that my exit was glorious for all reasons. And that's a whole other story, but it bought me like 6 months off. And so I took a very intentional sabbatical and I said, I am not working. I changed my LinkedIn. I was like, I'm out of the game for the next 6 months. You want to wait till 6 months? I'm happy to talk to you then. But for right now, I'm going dark. And I used that time and I wrote. My kids would go to school every day. My husband would go to work. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And it was because I had all these thoughts off of this toxic work environment, but also just because I realized like I had learned a lot. And actually the book was about twice the length of what came out. But then when I talked to a publisher, they're like, that's way too long. And so we cut the book in half. And so just half was published already. I've got the other half sitting on standby to launch another time. But it was less about business and more about personal. So I'll launch that one day. But for now, I got it out. And then I sat on it for 2 years and I went back to work and then finally published it last September.
Well, I'll have to check it out. And what are some of the sort of central themes? We get a lot of, executives that listen to this podcast that might resonate with that title, where it is really tough to thrive, but also keep your personal identity, your personal mission, and, balance all of these balls that you have in the air as life gets increasingly complex.
Yeah. I mean, the title kind of came out towards the end when I started narrowing in on the themes. I started writing it because I was so burned out and I realized I hadn't taken any time off. And as other than maternity leave, which is I guess time off, but different. And so I was just exhausted. And so when I started writing it, it was really about kind of like why I was taking a sabbatical, what drove me into that, what made me okay with taking a sabbatical. And then when I reflected back, I thought, man, my whole career has been just a massive blessing. Like it had been a gift. Even like the bad experiences had taught me something amazing. And I had become a better leader, wife, mother, friend because of it. And so I really wanted to kind of capture some of those stories and realize that there was such grace in the struggles. There was the gifts that come out of those. So I talked a lot about that and talked a lot about like not being willing to compromise on my sort of non-negotiables in the workforce. So things that I think people, especially women, get concerned about saying no to or putting guardrails up around, that it might somehow affect their career progression or whatever. I was always very vocal and always kind of, and not in an obstinate way. Like I was always very collaborative, but I always was kind of like, hey, these are the things that are important to me. Hey, I'm not going to take that promotion because I'm not willing to trade off this part of my life. And those things actually, every time I did that, people would be like, no, 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 you are. I'll make sure you don't have to trade that off, but I'm going to promote you anyway. Or I know you're not looking to get a bigger job, but you're smart and you're good at it. So I'm going to give you a bigger job, but I'm not going to make you work more. Like, people were just really great. And it was such a gift that I haven't applied for a job since college. I just have had really amazing people that have kind of taken me from one place to the next all throughout my career, opened the doors for me or recommended me to a headhunter for a role or whatever it was. And so that's just been really a gift, that kind of keeping your head down and doing good work kind of pays off on its own without you having to kind of go do unnatural things.
Well, we'll have to put the link to the book in the show notes. And yeah, I hear you. Sounds like you've been really intentional with your career. You learn how to set these healthy boundaries that turned out to increase your opportunity, not hinder them. And something interesting you said there, which is a common theme with a lot of the really exceptional, talented, kind humans that we get on this podcast, is you looked at the challenges as gifts. You were able to, and I think that really high performing people are able to make that connection of, okay, this sucks right now, and maybe this person sucks or this situation sucks, but what can I learn from this? How is this going to make me better? How is this going to allow me to grow? And I know in my personal life and career, it's been on the back of difficult situations where the biggest period of growth usually happens.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Christian by belief, and and my faith is super important. A lot of the book is grounded in my faith and talking about how that led me through the journey. But in there, there's stuff all over, the Bible, whatever, that talks about that God just doesn't waste pain. He doesn't waste struggle, that there's always a purpose in it. And so I trust that. And I think that affects, that's personal and professional. I think every part of life. So if we can look at it through that lens, I think it gives you a different kind of hope than just the downside of rough situations.
I like that quote. God doesn't waste pain or struggle. That's a good one to keep up there. I love it. All right. So this is the GTM podcast. So we got to dive into the go-to-market waters. And I could probably talk about philosophical, personal development with you all day long, but let's get into it. And we were talking about kind of what we wanted to discuss in this podcast and overarching themes. And the one that kept coming up was kind of this idea of the 3 pillars of a modern go-to-market executive. And, some of the themes that made you a really powerful marketing leader. And you could kind of break them down into 3 pillars. And one was how to make sales love you, which is incredibly, incredibly important. If you have them on your side, you're so far ahead of a lot of marketing organizations. Number 2, how to create shared metrics, so everyone is kind of rowing in the same direction. And then 3rd, which is maybe the hardest one, is how to establish one cohesive customer journey. So I want to kind of dissect those with you. And let's start at the first one, which is how to make sales love you. Would love to understand how you think about that, how you've done that at Demandbase, from strategy to, the nitty gritty kind of tactical.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think it's one of those things that if it's misunderstood, it feels like you're going to make short-sighted bottom of funnel decisions. And that's not what it's intended. When I first got to Demandbase, I was very focused on making sure that my chief sales officer partner and I had very, very, very close relationship, and that we led by example, our managers led by example, and then our frontline sellers and marketers, that they felt that and worked very, very close. And so we've invested a lot of time in building that relationship, which has been awesome. But the first thing I told the team, I said, my number one goal in being in this role is to make sales love us. And that doesn't mean that, like I said, I'm going to give them just that I'm just going to optimize my whole organization around leads or around pipeline or around, those kind of things. It means that I'm going to set our sellers up to be successful as much as I can. That means that I want to give them a brand that they're proud of and that they're proud to represent. They're proud to outbound with. They're proud to put in their email signature. They're proud to work at that booth at the event. I want to give them air cover in the market, that there are press releases with product innovation and momentum going out, that they're seeing social momentum and thought leadership that makes them proud of what we're talking about in the market and the conversations we're starting. I want to make sure that they have the best possible content to do their jobs. That doesn't mean that they have 100 pieces sitting up in high spot that they're having to like navigate and figure out. I mean, I want to give them the 5 pieces that they really, really need. I want them to have the pitch deck they need, the objection handling that they need, the product, elements that they need to understand, the competitive differentiation that they need, how to close that customer and get them onboarded with the right product. Like I want to make sure they have, like, I call it a simple bill of materials. Like what's that simple bill of materials that they need? I want to make sure, of course, that they have really high quality pipeline. And so that doesn't just mean volume. That means that they've been properly qualified, that these people have the right need state that we're solving, that it's the right persona, that they have the right budget authority, that they have, that they're ready to buy something or actually in the headspace to consider an ABM solution or whatever it is that you might be selling. And then that we're actually getting those leads and we're nurturing them through. It's not a one and done. It's not that they attended a webinar and therefore we need to go close them. It means that they've been poking around on our website. They've been reading articles about ABM. They've been, attending a webinar. They stopped by our booth at the event. They're doing searches from an organic perspective that we're seeing in their activity. So that their footprint is indicating that they're a high intent and that we want to nurture them through. I think that's important. And then I want to make sure that we're singularly focused. And this is meaning that the way that our sales team is structured and the way and compensated and quoted aligns with where we're putting our marketing resources and dollars. So for instance, I don't have enough dollars to market to the whole world in every segment and every industry. So I need to pick, am I going to be an enterprise play or an SMB play? Am I going to be primarily US or English speaking countries, or am I going global and I'm going to go around the world? Am I going after marketers? Am I going after sellers? Am I going after both? Do I need to influence the CFO? Do I need to lead with a certain product or platform as sort of the lead horse? All of those things make sure that I'm, like, by having that conversation in lockstep with our sales team, it makes sure that the target accounts that we're going after and the contacts at those accounts match so that we're all going after the same things. And so that means when sales sees a high intent lead come through or SQL, they can look at it and say, ooh, this is all the things we're working on. They're on my target account list. Thank you, marketing, for warming them up. I can grab that now and follow up. And the marketing can continue to nurture. So I think those are all really important. And then I want to give them pricing and packaging that's easy for them to quote and sell. So that means that they've got a very simple offering. They've got a 1-2 of maybe a base and a premium offering, that the pricing scales, that they have talking points on why to upsell, that they understand what the land and expand might look like on that. If they sold one, what should they follow up with upon expansion? And make sure that's crystal clear. And then I think the last one is I want to make sure that we as a company, especially now mine's pretty specific to the product that I'm in, but I want to make sure that we are exemplifying what we're selling to our customers. So by selling ABM, we are selling sales and marketing alignment. That's what account-based sales and marketing is. And so if that's what we're selling, then we better live it. So we run Demandbase on Demandbase. Our marketers and our sellers use it so we can speak authentically to our prospects and customers about our experience with the product. And they're seeing what alignment looks like. And hopefully every time they see me and John, my sales leader, on a stage together, in a podcast together, or talking together, or doing articles together, or commenting on each other's social, they're saying, man, that's a marketing and sales team that works together and they run on Demandbase. Like that's how I want to operate. So I think there's some authenticity in there, but all of that is about making sales job easier.
There's a lot there. And my question to you is, how did you balance coming into Demandbase? Like, you've been in marketing for so long, like you have the knowledge and expertise to build a hypothesis of like, hey, this is what our best guess at pricing and packaging is going to be. This is our best guess at what the best content you're going to need. How did you balance this idea of like proactive marketing, where it's kind of led by marketing and you're giving it to the sales team, versus almost more reactive and like listening to the sales team? Because I know a lot of organizations I've been with is sales really, really wants to feel heard. They're on the front lines, they're having these conversations, and that like feedback loop is so important. And it seems like you've nailed that at Demandbase. What does that feedback loop look like, and how do you integrate that into, your marketing plan?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think, even you used the word earlier on a separate conversation, but about being intentional. I think it's really, really important. So, one example that we had just recently, so we have a weekly pipeline review, and it's the sales leaders and the marketing leaders and our ops team sit together and we go through pipe every single week. We look at what the lead volume looks like, we look like the conversion rates down to pipe, and we look, and then we have it's just an open discussion around where are things breaking down, troubleshooting, how do we help. And in one of those meetings, the sales team said, "Hey, we really need to go after certain verticals." It was in like our mid-market business. We really need to go after certain verticals. And so I was like, "Okay, well, which verticals?" They say, "Hey, we're seeing a lot of opportunity in FinServe, manufacturing, and industrial or something." And so I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Well, then we can take a follow-up action to see what kind of content we develop and to help you with that and see how we can run ABM against those verticals. Let's find some target accounts to go after, understand the pain points. We can do that." They're like, "Okay." So I said, "We'll follow up." So I reach out to my team and I'm like, "Hey, we need to figure out a way to stand up some vertical content and programs to enable our sales force." Well, my team takes off running and they start activating and they start creating content and building pitch decks and looking for case studies and looking for programs and building out campaigns and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Did any of you go back to sales to double click into what they actually needed in that?" And this was like, because they were getting stressed. And I was like, and they were like, "Well, no, you said vertical." And I was like, "Vertical could mean a lot of stuff. Like, what do you?" And so they had spun up like they kicked off the work streams in all these areas. So I go back to sales and they say, and they said, "Oh yeah, we have a meeting next week." And I was like, "What are you going to do between now and then? Like, drop a Slack, like find out what they need now. Like, don't waste another week of time working on stuff. Like, pick up the phone, like, or, the virtual phone, which is Slack, I guess, and go ask." And so they did. And turns out sales was like, "Oh, we just need to understand the pain points and we need some case studies." And we're like, "Well, man, we could do that in a week. You guys spun up like a 6-month project over here. And in a week, we can spin that." Like, that's very different. And all it took was like stopping to say, "Hey, let's go back really quick, validate that what we thought we heard is actually what you need." And I think that's really about being intentional. It's like, don't create extra work for yourself. Like, if they say, "Hey, we need, sky's the limit." Okay, well then let's figure out resources and budget and timing and timeline and all that. But that's not what they wanted. They just needed some basic door opener type stuff. And I was like, "Okay, well, we can do that pretty easily." And so I think it's just really like, that's just hearing one soundbite. I appreciate my team activating on it. It's great. But how do we activate and verify that we're activating on the right stuff? So I think that's a big one. Now, I've worked in companies where the opposite has happened, right? Where, so I love that, we sort of joke now that John and I are like very kind of Ward and June Cleaver about the whole thing. Like, yay, we work together and we love each other and it's great. But I've certainly worked much more often in it not being as friendly. I was at a company before this, and I had a sales leader who was very polite, I'll say. And so when we would meet one on one, I'd be like, "How are things going? Like, how are we? Can we support you?" And he'd be like, "It's great, doing well. Like, we're good. We got everything we need." So I'd be like, "Okay, he must be okay with what's happening." And then I would talk to my boss, and he'd be like, "Sales leaders complaining about like they're not getting anything they need from marketing. They're not getting whatever. They need more volume. They need more content. They need that, that, that." And I was like, and I realized like, I kind of joke like politeness was kind of getting in the way of actual action, right? I needed to have a conversation. So I went back to it. I'm like, "Hey, I need you to shoot straight. Like, I can't fix anything if I don't know it's broken. Like, don't try to like protect my feelings." And so then it was like slowly started opening up the conversation of like what we could do. And so it does require like actively asking, like, "Tell me, no, tell me again, tell me again." Cause sometimes sellers are anxious to be heard, but a lot of times they don't want to bother marketing or like, "Oh, marketing's not going to change for me." But I think again, it's about being really, really intentional.
Yeah. And oftentimes I think sales leaders, they don't want to complain and they feel like they can, "I'll solve it ourselves. So we'll push harder this quarter." And yeah, that's a funny call out that, politeness is not always the way. You need some friction to, polish systems and process. That, friction is what gets things smooth over time. And you can't be overly polite. So moving to the second pillar, how did you and John, your counterpart, kind of align around shared metrics across the organization?
Yeah. So one thing we did, and I just suggested it kind of in passing before I started. And I didn't know that the leadership team was going to activate on it before I ever got here, but it was a gift. Is I made a comment that if sales ops is sitting in sales and marketing ops is sitting in marketing, then there's a risk that we're going to have different incentives, different data, different views, different KPIs. And so I made a comment like, hey, maybe we should combine that team and just have them report into an independent third party like finance. So that happened the week before I started. So I was like, okay, well, I guess you get what you asked for. And so now we have a combined RevOps team that handles sales and marketing ops. And the idea is that they are a single source of data. They run a single, neutral, unbiased pipeline review, revenue review, all that good stuff. And so they're able to expose to us like, hey, here's some opportunities I'm seeing that, the leads are coming in on too small accounts, or that we have SQL stalling out, not moving, not getting converted to pipe, or whatever it is. And so, and you don't assume that it's like the annoying sales ops guy that's telling marketing they're not doing their job, or the annoying marketing ops person that says, hey, sales, do your job. It's an independent group who's like, hey, I'm vested in all of you being successful. And so that's been a real gift for us. And so that's one of them. And then it's us sitting down and aligning on those metrics in the beginning. So what we do, to me, the worst thing I can do is focus on any of the kind of vanity metrics. I use them for leading indicators. What's our like, are we generating growth on social? Not because it has anything to do with revenue, but it kind of tells me like, is our content relevant? So should we keep doing this kind of stuff? Website visitors. Okay, people are coming. That's good. Somehow they're finding us, means our organic is probably working, that kind of stuff. But things that matter to me are what's going to drive pipe. And so we sit down, like he has a goal of revenue, of course, bookings, close one bookings at the end of every quarter. Mine is to give them enough pipeline to hit those so that I can give them, 3, 4, 5x pipeline coverage. And then backing into that, how many then SQLs, MQLs do I need to get there? And so really, but at the end of the day, like if I deliver all the MQLs, no one cares. If we deliver pipeline, then it matters because now we have something that are viable opportunities that are actually going to close. So those are the two things that are most important to us is pipeline and revenue. And then what we realized too is that we got to make sure that there are people in sales that are mapped to those same things. So we realized about a month ago that because of some reorg and structures in the sales team, that there was no human in sales who was incented on pipeline. So the SDRs were incented on getting it to meeting. The AEs were incented on giving it to closed one, but no one was incented on getting it to pipe. So I was like, wait a sec, like I don't have a partner on the other side of the fence to kind of make sure that we hit, because we're tied to pipe. And so we said, how is that going to work? And so we had a conversation. So of course we sit down, we have a conversation. We say, hey, who owns pipe? Who is being held accountable? How do we do this? And we were able to figure out a solution with sales managers and how they drive and the way that our processing and reminders and all the tools are set up. So it worked out great. So now we're kind of humming. But it was one of those that like without that established kind of relationship or those established kind of what are these key KPIs, then we're not going to get there. And it's just not a game anymore of I'll throw stuff over the fence. And then my hands, then I'm done. And then sales, you go do your job. And if we don't get revenue, it's your fault. It's not that anymore, right? It's like it's an orchestrated dance. Like we're continuing to market while sales is talking. It's not a funnel like it used to be. I was on a call yesterday and these other marketing leaders I was talking to, they said they called it like a cyclone. Like it's just this spiral of like marketing and sales frenzy activities until something eventually falls out the bottom. But it's definitely not this like, you drop it in.
Linear funnel.
Yeah, it's not nearly as linear as we think it is. And so because of that, like we have to always be marketing. They have to always be selling. And hopefully that overlap and that handshake versus handoff is what we kind of call it. then hopefully gets, the best ones out the bottom.
Well, I'm excited to see the go-to-market cyclone graphics that are going to spin out after this conversation. We've all seen the funnel too many times. We need the updated infographic with the cyclone. I wanted to double click on something you said there because I thought it was brilliant, and I know a lot of organizations are still set up in the way where you have a BD leader who is driving, qualified meetings or meetings, and then you have the sales team that are closing them. But yeah, there's not a true owner of this like gap in between, which is pipeline. And it sounds like you've solved that or in the process of solving it. So who does own that now? And it almost seems like it's your person on the other side of the fence, making sure that, they're catching all the balls and they're going where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, because you know what? So where it showed its head, just to give it some context, is around around week 2 or 3 of the last month of the quarter. Because all of a sudden you realize that like all of our SQLs just stalled. And it's because the AEs, who are the ones who grab SQLs, turn them into pipeline, and then take them through to close, are trying to close. So they're trying to finish the quarter and close out. And so those SQLs seem like we're not going to close those this quarter. Our sales cycle's too long, so I'll just wait on those. I'm going to focus on the guys I can get over the fence or over the line and close. The challenge with that, yes, obviously as a marketer, I have KPIs and I would love to hit pipeline. And so that's frustrating and that there isn't an owner there. But the other thing, much more important thing is that those SQLs are going to dry up, right? Like they don't hang out forever. They show enough interest, and, read enough content. And if no one is helping them move forward, they may go find a competitor and go somewhere else or lose their interest in ABM. So you kind of got to strike while the iron's hot. So that's the bigger issue if you kind of abandon. But that timing is what was happening. And so what we figured out was we didn't want to go back to SDRs having pipeline, because what was happening was it was creating tension between SDRs and AEs. On like, do I accept it? Do I not? Am I doing a favor to my SDR? I don't think it's good. I don't want to insult him. Like this kind of weird. So we didn't want to add that level of tension. So we made it the sales manager KPI. So meaning the AE managers, to make sure, because it's about discipline at the end of the day, and it's about hygiene, and it's about making sure that those AEs are working their whole funnel all the time. They're working all their deals, all the SQLs coming their way. They're getting those meetings scheduled. They're getting them over the fence. And so by putting it on the manager's responsibility, they were driving that behavior to, hey, don't leave those SQLs sitting. Like, get those meetings scheduled, get those people there, get them over the line. And that's how we ended up doing it. So we added it to their sort of KPI list, which works well. And then and then it also sort of forces some conversations. There's, I don't know if you've read a book, The Jolt Effect. Have you ever read that?
I haven't, no.
It's a sales and marketing book, or I guess it's about a customer book. But one of the things it talks about is that people are happy to be, no one talks in these terms, but people are happy to be on a website. They're happy to be an MQL. Like they're happy to I'll fill out this form to read this content. I'll register for this webinar. That's great. But when it comes to I got to talk to somebody now, it sort of goes dark. Like fear hits. Like, oh, I'm not ready to talk to a human. Or I'm not ready to
the jolt.
Yeah, that jolt effect of I'm just gonna stop. So there's this stall that happens in SQL. So to me, it's the hardest part of selling is to get somebody from their fear state over to you have to talk to a human now in 2024 when people don't talk to humans that they don't know anymore. And then you have to, now I'm in a sales cycle. Now I've got somebody pitching me. Now I've got somebody showing me demos. Now I've got somebody, giving me quotes, and I have to respond, and I have to shop it internal. And there's a lot of behaviors that become very scary once you get to that stage. And so when no one in the team is focused on getting those people from the scary stage over, then it becomes a challenge. So that's one of those things how can marketing help get them over the scary stage? That's through content, that's through enablement, that's through, trust and customer stories and all the things that we can do to kind of help customers feel confident in taking that step.
Yeah, I like that. And now you've got the sales AE managers KPI to deal with the jolt effect, and they're responsible for getting them over that that initial jolt. I think that's super actionable, and folks that might have structural or stalls in their pipeline like that, I would steal that and adopt that for sure. Um, Last filler, which again I alluded is like maybe one of the hardest, is one cohesive customer journey. And we already described that journey as kind of a cyclone. So making that a cohesive cyclone can be can be tough. How do you think about that? Like you talked about this weekly pipeline review. I'm sure that's helpful to keep understanding how that's evolving and changing. What other ways have you been able to keep that cohesive with the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that the customer journey is so much longer than it used to be. I mean, obviously digitally and things it can go faster, but it doesn't end. Like I said, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it sort of ended at lead from a marketer, from marketing's perspective. Now it goes much further and it doesn't even end at pipe. Like that might be important. We also do customer retention marketing. Like, how do we get, now that they've signed, how do we get them to stick around? Deal acceleration marketing. So, okay, we got them into a pipeline. They're there. How do we continue to help them? Whether it's through, direct mail gifting, whether it's through a customer dinner or a prospect dinner at an event or whatever it is. So there's deal acceleration initiatives. And then there's, once they close, getting them onboarded. Like, how can we as marketing make sure they have the right content to become sticky? How do we get them fully immersed in the product? How do we help their time to value? How do we get them, to recognize the value much faster? It shouldn't be 6 months out. Like, how do we get them like grateful for the purchase at weeks, not months? And then getting them using the product. How do we get them to do some multi-threading so that you have buyout or buy-in across the organization? So that they have their sales teams on board and their CS teams on board and their marketing teams or whoever the customer audience is. And then how do we get them to expand? How do we upsell them? So that customer journey is just so much longer than it used to be. So one, understanding that journey, and then thinking, the way I like to think of it is, what are the big questions that a prospect is having at every stage of that journey? And so to me, that's what should drive the content. That's what should drive the programs, the media, all that, the SEO, the webinars, is to think about like what is ABM? Maybe that's an early question. I'm using obviously a Demandbase specific example, but what is ABM? Do I need ABM, or am I ready for ABM? How will ABM affect my business? How hard is ABM to integrate into my business? Will it integrate with my current tech stack? What kind of ROI should I expect if I buy this? How much does it cost? How does it work? Like, if you think about all those different stages, and even before that, maybe even before ABM, it's I'm using a demand-based competitor, but I'm not happy. Who are the other competitors I should be looking at? So competitive sale versus a category sale, very different. Or I just need more revenue. How do I generate more pipeline? Not knowing that ABM might be the answer to that. And so there's kind of a different, like, everybody's coming at a slightly different approach, in a different spot in the journey, but eventually they all kind of land in the main thing, which is ROI, experience, integration, pricing, onboarding, all those things. And so once you understand that journey and what those key questions are, then it's about mapping out programs to it. Where does, and mapping it to whichever accounts you're going after. But where does sales come in? Where does marketing? When is the handoff? When should we keep marketing while sales is still selling? Yeah, so I think that's the way I like to think of it, is sort of, what are the key questions they're asking at every step? And then how do we build a sales and marketing, cyclone to that, to account for all those questions as they go through it.
I mean, that is a brilliant, brilliant exercise, and I haven't heard someone articulate it quite that way. It's like, okay, so you map out your customer journey, which I agree is longer than ever on both sides, right? There's all the way down to, cross sell, upsell, time to value. But now it's also, with, signal based sales and intent, like, demand based being a leader in that, like the funnel is way earlier as well. So we have this elongated funnel, and then doing that exercise of mapping, okay, in each stage, what are the questions that our buyer, potential prospects are going to have, and then mapping programs, activations against how do we solve those problems and serve them at content or events that solve those. I think that's a brilliantly simple way to think about marketing and the customer journey. I like that. I like that. I think there's a few infographics that are going to come from this conversation. My brain is going in customer journey cyclone maps to questions aligned with programs and activations. I think is super
I may
cool.
have to send it to my team as well to go. I might say, hey, I said something good. Can you go make an infographic out of this? My design team is so much better. I don't know how to design anything, but they're brilliant. So let's see what they can come up with.
Let's see. That's a challenge to the Demandbase content and design team. Let's see what you got. I love it. All right. As we wrap up, this conversation has been really, really enjoyable. So thank you for the time. 3 kind of rapid fire questions. And one of them is we usually do a listener question. I actually am going to hijack the listener question because I'm just curious about this because it's something I think a lot about is the differences and similarities between B2C marketing and brand versus B2B. You oversaw a lot of brand at Kraft, obviously consumer food. What have you pulled forward from that experience? Because, B2B marketing we can play it safe or it can be boring. And B2C, I think, has a little bit more creativity. And what have you pulled forward from kind of your B2C experience?
Yeah. So a couple things. So yeah, I was I was at Kraft Foods for 4 years. I managed Chips Ahoy, Nutter Butter, Breakstone cottage cheese, and Kraft string cheese over those few years. I think the biggest thing is that brand management in B2C versus B2B is very different. So in B2C, brand management is like a GM. It's probably more akin to like a product marketing almost in a B2C or a B2B world. But they're a GM of the business. So we own the P&L, we own the cost structure, revenue, how we're going to spend advertising dollars, trade dollars with the retailers. I mean, all kinds of things. And so you end up thinking much more holistically about the P&L and understanding all the levers that affect it. When I left, and I've loved it. It made me a better marketer. It is marketing 101. I think every marketer should go through some CPG training to get there. But when I left there, I had a kid, and I was moving to Texas because my family was here and it was too far away with a baby. And so we decided to come down to Texas. There wasn't a lot of consumer goods here in Austin, and so I had to go tech. And so the jobs that I was getting interviews for were these brand manager jobs in tech. And I got there and they'd be like, yeah, so you manage the logo. And I'd be like, okay. And it was like the logo and the logo guidelines and like the creative, look and feel or whatever. And I was like, that's it. And it was like, yeah, like you didn't touch the business. You didn't touch the revenue. You didn't touch any of that stuff. And since then, I think brand marketers have gotten much more savvy and that kind of thing. But at the time, that was a big, that was 15 years ago, but that was a big change. And so I realized that like brand means different things. That was one. And then, but consumer marketing does brilliant marketing. I had a much more hefty sort of advertising budget when I was on Chips Ahoy. And so we could do really, really creative. We got the best agencies in the world, came up with these amazing concepts. B2B is super functional, right? No one wants to kind of build like soft brand equity. They build it like in hard facts and features and benefits. And so it just becomes a little bit more sterile. And when you try to add personality, you immediately skew SMB. You don't look serious for enterprise. So it's a really different dance in the brand space. But I do think if we could get that creative hook into the B2B world, and some companies are doing great at it, but I think it's one of those that's been a long time coming. And then I think the pace of change in tech is so much faster. Whereas consumer, you have consumer hearts and minds, you have to tiptoe a little bit around it. So it's like I was marketing cookies, and so I wasn't allowed to market to kids because they had sugar in them. And so I had to like market to the mom about something that would make her kids really happy without marketing to the kid directly. And so I couldn't do it like on PBS at like 3 p.m. I had to do it like at prime time once kids were asleep. I could market cookies. So like all these kind of different regulatory issues that you don't have in the tech world. So there's some different sides, but I love both. I don't know if I could go back to CPG now that I've lived the pace of SaaS.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought of it it might be because we're lucky as marketers and go-to-market leaders in tech that we constantly have something new to market. That we actually like kind of a gift and a curse. We don't have to get overly creative because there's always new things that we can kind of bring to the market versus like a cookie's a cookie. So you got to get pretty creative over time.
That's probably true. Yeah. And we run everything digitally or mostly. So we can update creative and messaging daily. Whereas like consumer is doing a lot of out of home. They're doing a lot of TV advertising and print and radio and in caps in stores and all kinds of things that are more physically permanent. You can't change them near as fast.
Makes sense. All right. Final two questions. First one, and these are intentionally vague, so take them wherever you want, is what is one widely held belief that revenue leaders hold to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
Gosh, I think there's a lot. I feel like most some people have kind of uncovered the reality of the crap. I think there's probably a few that I would go down really quick, like off the cuff. That leads mean anything. I think all they are is sort of a leading indicator for troubleshooting. They don't actually indicate any kind of expectation of revenue. I think you have to get to pipeline to make sure it's valid. I think that if sales teams or marketing teams think they can do it alone, I think that's hogwash. I read some stat today that said that there's a difference of like at least 10% or more difference in revenue if sales and marketing teams are aligned versus operating independently. And I think that is sorely low. Like I think it's probably 30%, 40% if they're working together. But I've seen so many sales and marketing organizations that just don't. They just think marketing is making pretty pictures, sales is doing the real revenue business, instead of recognizing that by working together, it's so much more powerful. Those are probably two. And then I think intent data is one that's going to be really interesting and what AI does for that. And I think the belief is that all intent is created equal, and I don't believe that it is. I think that there's got to be transparency in the way intent data is revealed. The way that people use it. I think it has to be grounded in really intelligent AI back end. So I think those are a few quick ones.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those. And I have my eye very closely on, what you're doing at Demandbase and a few others around intent and like signal-based sales. I think like as I try and think of the future go-to-market playbook and what that looks like, it's kind of best of my ability is going to look like signal-based sales, where we're going to have this like AI-driven, very contextual signals that we know where they're coming from, how to action them, and then kind of paired with this idea of like ecosystem-led growth, like understanding relationship mapping more than we've ever been able to before, since we're in such a like hyper-connected world now. So excited! It must be exciting to be at the forefront.
For sure. I think people are scared of what AI can do. And I think there's areas like I just watched the trailer for that full AI movie. Have you seen that? It's awful. It's like Meet Me in Paris or something. It's horrible. But it's the first feature film completely created by AI. You should Google it. But anyways, it was, but so I think AI can be scary in some areas. Intent is not one of those areas. To me, like there are so many signals that can help marketers be so much more effective and so much more efficient with their dollars and their time and their resources. That I think if you can find it, but where it's not a load of crap, but where it's actually like transparent, you can see why is this intent score high? Oh, because this person visited this site and searched for this and read this article and attended this event and watched this webinar. Okay, that intent signal tells me why it's relevant. I think I think we're going to see companies start spitting out things like intent signals, AI driven, that are just a load of crap. And I think we're going to see some of that. But I think if we have the data and the backup and the transparency to justify it, I think it can be incredibly powerful for a marketer.
Opening up that black box and showing, the insides of how it's actually working, I think will be really cool. All right. Final question is, everyone is trying to figure out things that are working today. It is still hard. I think we're moving in the right direction, but things are still tough out there. What's one go-to-market tactic or strategy that's currently working at Demandbase?
To me, like my favorite in the world, I mean, the place I'm always going to start when I join a company or focus resources is in SEO. I mean, to me, it's the gift. SEO is how you get high intent buyers to your site. They convert at the highest rate. They are they're informed. They're doing a lot of their research before they get there. It works in today's kind of self-serve mode where people aren't ready to talk to people. They just want to read and understand. So I'm just a believer that if there's one thing I could do, if I just optimize my site and all of my content for search, I would be able to generate half the revenue that we're generating anyway, like with one tactic. And it happens to be free, other than the resources to write. It is a completely organic model. So to me, that's the one that can scale. That's the one that can get there. Now it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you get your tech and your content SEO all humming on full cylinders, you can generate a lot of traffic and a lot of revenue because those are the people you want looking at your product.
I like it. Well, we're running out of time, but that might be a totally other episode or something we'll have to collaborate on, because I would love to pick your brain on how you think about SEO, because I think it is evolving pretty rapidly. But that'll be a discussion for another day. But Kelly, thank you so much. That was awesome. I know you had an incredibly busy day, so thanks for taking the time to hang with us.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Busy day or not, I love this stuff. So I love the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And to all our listeners, go check out Demandbase. And I say this every week, but listening's one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully some of these tactics, strategies, and stories inspire you to go make some changes, some tweaks, and we'll see you all next week.